What's up, college football addicts? So I really didn't want to make this video. I didn't want to give life to this, as you'll understand why in just a moment, but I didn't want to make this. And I really didn't last week. I made a video over on our team-only channel, but didn't think that this was warranted because I just thought it was too out there and you guys would be very, very aware of everything that I would tell you, everything that I would talk about with this. Well, this doesn't seem to be dying, and we've gotten so many questions from Florida State fans, Clemson fans, Miami fans, North Carolina fans, just fans all over of, is this possible? And so I really didn't want to do this, but as the noise continues to grow, as you have the loudest, most incorrect voices really popping up at the last moment, at the midnight hour, I guess we'll go ahead and talk about it. And we'll talk about Florida State and Clemson, the rumors of the Big 12 noise, the rumors of where things are headed. Last week, obviously, you had the Ross Dellinger situation where John Kurtz, who I follow John Kurtz, I like his channel. I think he does a really good job breaking down different things within college football. John Kurtz interviewed him. John Kurtz obviously wrote out a title and a description that was very enticing. We do that here too. Some of you have complained about it. That's fine. I don't care. But certainly was enticing, and the title didn't tell the full story, didn't give the full picture. The tweet itself didn't explain all of what Ross talked about. But if you watched the video, if you actually listened to the interview, that did. And I'm sure several of you college football addicts actually did that. And so you weren't really that shaken by what Ross said. You weren't really that taken aback by the fact that he said, yeah, Florida State wants to end up in the Power 2. And then maybe next, they'd probably stay in the ACC. And then if all other options failed, then they'd go to the Big 12. Well, that's not really the same as the Big 12 and Florida State are in talks to potentially be joining up. That's clearly not the same thing. But Ross's actual statement, what he actually said was, man, they may end up there if everything else falls through, if nothing else can happen for them. One thing he didn't say, which I do think is a very real possibility, is the idea that Florida State and Clemson could go independent for a year and try to attack things that way. That's not something he mentioned. That's something that does have some different layers to it that we'll break down maybe in another video if we think that that's a necessary thing to do. But I think there are a lot of options before Florida State and Clemson would sign on and agree to being in the Big 12. Well, the Ross Dellinger situation seemed to come and go. And then Jason Scheer, a reporter for the 247 network, covers Arizona, tweeted this last night. He said, according to sources, there is an internal belief in the Big 12 that Florida State and Clemson are likely to join the conference within the next year or so. You got to love when there's put a timeline on something, and then there's kind of a disqualifier for the timeline within the next year or so. You know, if it's not the next year, it could be a little after. It could happen a little bit later. It could happen in, if it happens in 18 months, then I still was right, because year or so could be anything. Oh, well, it ended up being 2 years, but that's just slightly different, or whatever the situation may be. Now, I will tell you this. Jason Scheer got one thing right last year when he talked about Colorado and Arizona. Though Arizona was not the central piece in this, they were definitely an add-on. But he got one thing right. I don't know necessarily that he is the end-all, be-all when it comes to conference realignment. I can understand why he would have West Coast sources. I can't imagine him being plugged in on what's going on with two ACC teams that are still bound by a contract in their current conference. You see the difference between what was happening last year in the Pac-12 and what was happening, or what is happening in the ACC right now, is that everyone in the world could read the writing on the wall and realize that teams in the Pac-12 were not going to stay in the Pac-12 long. Once the dam broke with UCLA and USC leaving, and then obviously Oregon and Washington leaving, it was pretty clear the Pac-12 was not going to have a way to get a media rights deal done. And so maybe it was insight, maybe it was just a really good targeted guess, which he got with the Colorado part. The Arizona part came later. Maybe it was just a really good targeted guess to get Colorado back into the Big 12, which is what he predicted. Now, they were already there. It didn't take a brain surgeon. And I'm not trying to take away from Scheer, but if you look at his track record in covering coaching searches just this last January and February, it's not stellar. Now, we all miss. We all make mistakes. I'm not saying that Jason Scheer does a bad job. But a lot of people are pointing to the fact that he got the Colorado-Arizona thing right a couple of years ago, and thinking, well, he must be the end-all be-all. He must be all-knowing when it comes to realignment. I don't think that's the case. Now, I do think there are some possibilities with this. I do think that there are some reasons why this might be happening, and I want to talk about those as well as what I believe the truth to be. Now, see, I've spoken with some folks very close to Florida State and Clemson both. Having done this for the last several years, we've made some contacts. We've gotten to know some people. I'm not telling you that Mike Norvell or President McCullough at Florida State or Graham Neff or anyone else is the one that I'm talking with. I'm not trying to allude to that at all. But we do have contacts very close to both programs. And I sent them some of these tweets this weekend. I sent them some tweets from Greg Swaim, who you all sometimes comment about. I sent them this tweet from Jason Shearer. And the responses I got back were, this is laughable. There's no chance. This is not a reality. And so why would this be coming out? I truly do not believe that Florida State and Clemson have any desire, have any reason to be looking at the Big 12 as a serious option. I believe that they're like a plan C or D option. I believe that they're a we have no other option. But the idea that Florida State and Clemson would join the Big 12 within the next 12 months or so is laughable, according to folks at Florida State and Clemson. And you can believe that we're chatting with people. You can believe that we're not. I don't care. I really don't care. People that understand the channel, people that understand what we've done for a while, they know. And so that's fine. If you don't believe it, if you want to go with the Arizona guy that couldn't figure out when Jed Fish was leaving or where he was going or whatever, that's fine with me. I have no problem with it. But the internal belief in the Big 12 is that Florida State and Clemson are likely to join the conference. Where's that? What is that? When you really just break that down, when you think about that on its own, and you think about what does that mean? What is he saying there? And who has that internal belief? We're not asking you to reveal sources. You guys ask me all the time, who's your source? Nobody gives up their sources. That's a silly thing to ask. But where's that internal belief coming from? Is that coming from coaches? Is that coming from administration? Is that coming from folks that he's close with at Arizona? Is that coming from, where is that coming from? Where in the Big 12 is that internal belief? Because obviously that's very far ranging. Well, if you don't give specifics, you can't be wrong. If you also very loosely say things, not Florida State and Clemson are joining the Big 12, there's an internal belief. There's thoughts, there's well wishes, there's prayers, there's hopes that Florida State and Clemson might be coming over. Nothing concrete there. Nothing at all. Not even a timeline next year or so. Internal belief. There's thoughts, there's wishes, there's hopes, there's prayers. We all feel good. Rainbows and unicorns. They might be coming. Why would the Big 12 want this out there? Which I believe is the case. I think it's a great marketing look. I think this looks really good for the Big 12. I think this looks phenomenal for them. The Big 12 is being propped up right now by false statements and misinformation that is not true. I'm telling you it's not true, but it's being propped up right now to look better than it was. Wow, if your mark can pull this off. And you listen to the narrative around it. Listen to the talk around it. Go watch the different shows that cover conference realignment. They were all live last night. Kurtz was live. Others were live. Listen to them. What are they saying? Man, I don't think this happens. But if your mark pulls this off, he is the genius of all geniuses. And so you're starting to craft that narrative. The narrative, once Florida State and Clemson end up somewhere other than the Big 12, right? Once they end up in the Power 2, most likely. What is the narrative then? Man, the Big 12 missed out on Florida State and Clemson, but darn it if they weren't close. Darn it if Yormark didn't have them knocking on the door. Darn it if Yormark didn't get Florida State and Clemson a better deal on the Power 2 because the Power 2 was worried about the Big 12 taking them. It was a leverage play for Florida State. It was just like coaching searches, right? That your coach was not wanted here at the school that he was rumored to go to. He was just using that to get a better contract. That will be the narrative. Florida State and Clemson were close. They were almost in. Yormark almost got them. But because Florida State was talking with the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC swooped in and got them, so the Big 12 couldn't take them. That will be the narrative. The narrative is not going to be, oh, Florida State and Clemson were never even considering the Big 12. It will be, Yormark almost pulled it off. What does that help with? future acquisitions, helps with other teams that are considering their future, where they'll go. How's that help with that? You can sell. Man, we were this close on Florida State and Clemson. Florida State and Clemson wanted to be here. When you're negotiating on back channels and back alleys right now, because you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to be talking with these teams while they're under a contract. But when you're negotiating, when you've got this stuff happening, and the narrative out there is that Florida State and Clemson are considering your conference, if you're these other teams, Miami, NC State, Virginia Tech, Louisville, Pittsburgh, well, Florida State, if it's good enough for Florida State and Clemson, is it not good enough for us? I think it helps a ton with marketing. I think it helps a ton with future acquisitions, and it helps with the ultimate narrative. However, it does not take a rocket scientist to know why this doesn't make sense for Florida State or Clemson. It does not take a rocket scientist to figure out why this would be a horrible move. Number one, it's the end of the day what they're fighting for, and it's money. It does not make any sense for Florida State and Clemson to spend a couple $100 million or more, as some of you like to point out. This could be a $571 million deal or up to a $600 million deal. It would make no sense to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to get into a conference that makes you about $10 million more a year. At best, makes you $10 million more a year. I don't even know if it would truly be that much once you consider what you're losing. You're losing some of those rivalries you have in the ACC. You're losing some of that local travel that you have in the ACC, and you're traveling way more. Now, travel costs are not going to eat up $10 million, but if you lose some fan support and you lose some ticket sales and you lose some money on travel, does it make it worth it when you've already spent a couple $100 million to get out? Not just the money part. Say you could figure out the money part. Say the Big 12 could figure out the money part. We'll talk about that in just a minute. What about the perception? What about the perception? And this is no shot. I love our guy Drake over at Locked On Big 12. I'm going to enjoy the Big 12 this year. This is not a shot in any Big 12 fans. But the perception is half the problem with Florida State and Clemson. You see, Florida State went 13-0 last year and got left out of the playoff because they're in the ACC. And you can tell me about Jordan Travis's injury. I get that. But you're telling me if Jalen Milroe would have been hurt that last game, they would not have put Alabama in? You're telling me that if J.J. McCarthy would have been hurt that last game, they would have left Michigan out? I don't believe that for a minute. They would never do that to an SEC or a Big Ten school. And so playing in the ACC is a problem for Florida State. I'm telling you right now, the Big 12 is not a better conference than the ACC as things stand today. Now, Florida State and Clemson leave, I will probably give the nod to the Big 12. But right now, there's no chance that the Big 12 is a better football conference than what the ACC is. Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame partially, all better. I think when you get to the teams like NC State, Louisville, Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, those are teams that are in programs that are comparable with Big 12 teams. And so, no, to make a step down move, it's not even a lateral move. It is a step down move in perception, would be horrible for Florida State. Now, if Florida State and Clemson were to be in the Big 12, then that conference to me would be better than what's left over of the ACC. I'll agree with that. Florida State getting there does make that conference better. But on its face, you remove Florida State and Clemson off the face of the earth. The ACC is better than the Big 12 is. And certainly with Florida State and Clemson, it's not close. But perception's a problem. If you don't leave the ACC to go play for another conference that's making less than the Power 2, that's not got as much representation as the Power 2, that doesn't have as good of a media deal, that's not thought of as highly as the Power 2, and think you're going to compete for titles. What about fan support? You've done all this over the last year or so, and your fans are 110% behind you, Florida State and Clemson fans. And they are absolutely bought in with every single thing that you're doing. They love the lawsuits. They love the way you're taking shots at the ACC. They love the way that you're fighting to get out of the conference. They love the way that you're attacking this. And then you land in the Big 12, there's going to be a lot of people canceling their hypothek. There's going to be a lot of people with problems at Seminole Boosters. There's going to be a lot of people that are upset with the way that went down. And I just don't think that's likely. I don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think it makes sense financially. It doesn't make sense from a perception standpoint, and certainly doesn't from a fan support standpoint. I think it's much more likely that Florida State and Clemson would go independent until getting a call up from the Big Two. I think it's more likely they'd stay in the ACC. If you're going to be making essentially the same amount of money, why would you not just stay where you are and not pay hundreds of millions of dollars to get out? And Ross Dellinger agrees with that. Jason Scheer can say whatever he wants. I don't really care, but Ross Dellinger agreed with that. What if the Big 12 could figure out a way to do it, though? What if they could figure out a way to pay them enough? Well, figuring out the money part's fine. The perception's still a problem, and the fan support's still a problem. But let's say they could figure out a way to do it. Hey, we're going to take this private equity money. Hey, we're going to give our other programs less. We're going to renegotiate our TV deal. We're going to get you close up there. What if they could do this? We'll get you up to more than the SEC and Big Ten make. Say they're at 75, we'll get you to 85. We'll pay you, Florida State and Clemson, we'll pay you more than the SEC and Big Ten are making. What about then? Then does it make sense? Then would you do it? Then would you go on and do that? Or there'd be a couple problems with that on both sides. Number one, Florida State would probably have to sign another grant of rights that would probably go further than the 2036 one they're locked into now. Florida State and Clemson would have to probably sell their rights for the next forever because it probably involved private equity. It probably involved really long-term 15 to 20-year deals. And I don't think Florida State would want to be tied down to that, especially in this ever-changing landscape. I think you want to be agile. You want to be able to move around. What about the Big 12 side? Would the other Big 12 presidents accept that? Would they say, yeah, bring in two teams that are just like Texas and Oklahoma, going to beat our heads in every year. We're never going to have a realistic shot to do anything, and give them some more of our money. Take more of our money away and give it to them. We would love that. I can't imagine too many Big 12 presidents would say yes to that. I can't imagine too many Big 12 teams would be okay with that. Hey, we're going to have a very clear pecking order here, and Florida State and Clemson are going to make a ton. We're just going to be the bottom feeders, and because they have more resources already, because they're already a better program than us, we're just going to let them beat our heads in for the next however long they're in the conference. I don't think the Big 12 would really like that either. And so that leaves us with, why in the world are folks worrying about this? No aspect of this makes sense at all. There's no reason to think that this has any chance of happening. I'm telling you, after chatting with people, both close with Florida State and close with Clemson, this is not a possibility. This is not something that's coming. But I do think that more is coming. I do think that more is on its way. I do think that more is about to happen. However, the warning to you guys is, don't get caught up in the misinformation and the nonsense that you see on social media. Think critically, think logically, and just ask yourself, does it make sense? The Big 12 taking on the Pac-12 teams made a lot of sense. They had no home. They had nowhere to go. They had no media rights deal. It was a horribly run conference. Florida State has places to go. Heck, they can stay in the ACC for the next, 12 years and be fine and keep taking checks. It's not as much as they want, but they have a home. To go to the Big 12 makes no sense at all. And because a guy guessed right about some Pac-12 teams that had no place to go and had no home and had no media rights agreement, because he guessed right and got them into the Big 12, doesn't necessarily mean that all hell is breaking loose and Florida State and Clemson fans need to freak out. Though we have been asked about it a lot, though we've gotten several questions on it, it's not something that I think you should be worried about at all. That said, SEC Media Day starts today. A week from today, I'll be in Charlotte for ACC Media Days. We'll try and do some content around that. Make sure that you're locked in with the channel. Make sure that you're subscribed. We're not selling you anything. We're not asking you to click a link. We're not asking you to go do this, go do that, whatever. If you enjoy the content, if you want more updates on this stuff, because I do think it's getting loud right now, just before it's about to get really, really loud. make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure that you're part of the College Football Addiction family. I appreciate you guys for always tuning in. I appreciate you guys for always hanging out, living in the comments, and loving our content. And we will talk to you guys soon on College Football Addiction.